You've been told that becoming your highest self requires years of healing, endless therapy sessions, and breaking through layer after layer of trauma. But what if I told you that quantum identity release is actually about letting go of the version of yourself that thinks it needs to be fixed? What if the universe is already designed to serve the real you, and you've just been wearing a mask that's too small? I'm about to share something that might completely flip your understanding of personal transformation. For decades, we've been sold this idea that growth means adding more to ourselves, becoming more disciplined, more healed, more worthy. But quantum physics reveals something radically different. At the subatomic level, particles exist in what's called superposition, meaning they hold infinite potential until they're observed into a specific state. Your identity works exactly the same way. Right now, as you're listening to this, you exist in quantum superposition. You're simultaneously the version of yourself that struggles, doubts, and feels small, and the version that effortlessly attracts abundance, love, and recognition. The question isn't how to become that bigger version. The question is, what are you doing that keeps collapsing your wave function into the smaller identity? Here's what the billionaires and quantum physicists don't want you to realize. Your small self isn't real. It's a learned pattern, a habituated way of observing yourself that keeps collapsing your infinite potential into limitation. Every time you think, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve this, or I need to work harder to be worthy, you're literally using the observer effect to shrink your quantum field of possibilities. The observer effect, discovered in the famous double-slit experiment, shows us that consciousness doesn't just witness reality, it creates it. When scientists observed electrons, they behaved like particles, following predictable paths. When unobserved, they behaved like waves, existing in all possible states simultaneously. Your identity follows this exact principle. When you observe yourself through the lens of limitation, you collapse into that small version. When you release that observation, you return to infinite possibility. Think about water for a moment. Water doesn't try to be wet. It doesn't struggle to flow downhill or work hard to take the shape of its container. Water simply is, and because of this effortless being, it's one of the most powerful forces on Earth. It carves canyons, moves mountains, and sustains all life. Your true identity is like water. It doesn't need to be improved or fixed. It needs to be released from the artificial containers you've been trying to squeeze it into. But here's where most people get trapped. They think releasing the small self means destroying their personality or losing their edge. They're terrified that if they stop being the person who struggles and strives, they'll become lazy or lose their drive. This is like a butterfly being afraid to leave its cocoon because it might forget how to be a caterpillar. The butterfly doesn't lose anything essential. It reveals what was always true. Your small identity is actually exhausting to maintain. Think about it. How much energy do you spend every day trying to be good enough, smart enough, worthy enough? How much mental bandwidth goes into monitoring whether you're doing enough, being enough, having enough? That's not your natural state. That's a learned program running in the background, constantly broadcasting a frequency of lack to the quantum field. The quantum field responds to frequency, not effort. It doesn't care how hard you're trying or how much you deserve something based on your struggle. It responds to the vibrational signature you're broadcasting, which is determined by the identity you're embodying. When you embody the small self, you broadcast frequencies of need, lack, and effort. The universe receives this signal and delivers experiences that match it. More situations where you need to try harder, more evidence that you're not quite there yet. But when you release into your natural identity, something extraordinary happens. You begin broadcasting from a state of wholeness, abundance, and effortless being. The universe receives this completely different signal and begins orchestrating reality to match it. Opportunities appear without striving. Resources flow without forcing. People are drawn to your energy without you needing to prove anything. I want you to imagine for a moment that you're a radio that's been trying to receive classical music by working really hard to tune into a rock station. You could turn up the volume, get better speakers, try harder to hear the classical music in the rock songs, but you'll never succeed because you're tuned to the wrong frequency. Releasing your small identity is like discovering you've been on the wrong station this entire time. You don't need better equipment or more effort. You need to tune into the frequency you actually want to experience. Here's a profound realization that changed everything for me. Your small identity isn't actually yours. It's a collection of other people's limitations that you absorbed and mistook for truth. Your parents' fears about money became your beliefs about scarcity. Your teacher's frustrations became your beliefs about your capabilities. Society's messages about what's possible became your beliefs about what you deserve. You've been living someone else's small story and calling it your identity. The beautiful thing about quantum mechanics is that it proves reality is far more fluid than we've been taught. At the quantum level, particles can be in multiple places simultaneously, they can communicate instantaneously across vast distances, and they can exist as pure potential until consciousness collapses them into specific experiences. You have these same quantum properties. You can exist in multiple states of possibility simultaneously until you choose which one to collapse into reality. But here's what's fascinating. Most people are unconsciously choosing to collapse into limitation over and over again, thousands of times per day, through their habitual thoughts, emotions, and self-observations. They wake up and immediately start observing themselves through the familiar lens of the small self. I'm tired. I don't want to go to work. I'm behind on my goals. I need to try harder. Each observation is a quantum measurement that collapses infinite possibility into the same limited experience. Quantum identity release is about becoming conscious of this process and learning to observe yourself differently. Instead of automatically tuning into the frequency of the small self, you begin to notice when you're about to collapse into limitation and instead choose to remain in the expanded state of possibility. It's like learning to surf the quantum wave of your potential instead of constantly crashing it onto the shore of the familiar. Let me share something that might sound radical. The version of yourself that you think you need to become already exists. Not as a future possibility, but as a present reality in the quantum field. Every version of yourself that you could ever want to be exists simultaneously in superposition. The confident version, the abundant version, the loved version, the successful version, they're all equally real and equally accessible right now. The only reason you're not experiencing that version is because you keep observing yourself through the old pattern and collapsing the wave function into the familiar small identity. It's like having access to every television channel in the world, but only ever turning to the one station that plays your old story of limitation. The other channels aren't broken or unavailable. You've just forgotten how to change the frequency. This is why trying to improve the small self never works long term. You can't upgrade a radio station by turning up the volume. You can't transform limitation by adding more effort to limitation. You can only tune into a completely different frequency, and that frequency is accessed not through doing more, but through releasing the need to be the version of yourself that requires improvement. Think about the people you know who seem to effortlessly attract what they want. They're not working harder than everyone else or following some secret technique. They're simply not broadcasting the frequency of need and lack. They've somehow avoided collapsing into the small identity, or they've learned to release it quickly when it appears. They're living from their natural state instead of their learned limitations. Your natural state is abundance, creativity, love, and infinite possibility. This isn't wishful thinking or spiritual bypassing. This is quantum physics. At your most fundamental level, you're made of the same quantum field that creates galaxies, orchestrates ecosystems, and maintains the precise balance that allows life to flourish. The same intelligence that grows your hair and beats your heart is the intelligence that you truly are. That intelligence doesn't struggle or doubt itself, it simply creates effortlessly from its own infinite nature. But we've been conditioned to believe that our thoughts, emotions, and circumstances define who we are. We've been taught to identify with the content of our experience instead of the consciousness that's aware of the experience. It's like mistaking yourself for the movie instead of the screen it's playing on. The movie can be dramatic, scary, or boring, but the screen remains unchanged, spacious, and capable of displaying any story. When you identify with the content, with the small self and its story of limitation, you become trapped in that particular movie. You try to improve the plot, change the characters, or fast forward to a better scene. But when you identify with the consciousness that's aware of the story, you realize you have the power to choose an entirely different movie. You're not stuck improving the current storyline. You can select from infinite possibilities. This shift in identification is what I call quantum identity release. You're not destroying anything or forcing change. You're simply releasing your attachment to being the character in the story and remembering that you're the consciousness that's capable of experiencing any story. From this expanded perspective, the small self becomes just one possible character you could play, not the truth of who you are. The universe responds to this shift immediately because you've stopped broadcasting from the frequency of limitation. Instead of sending out signals of, "I need this to feel complete," or I have to work hard to be worthy. You're broadcasting from wholeness, from the recognition that you already are what you've been seeking to become. This creates what quantum physicists call coherence between your inner state and your outer experience. Coherence is when all parts of a system are synchronized and working together harmoniously. In quantum terms, it's when your thoughts, emotions, and energy field are aligned with the same frequency. Most people live in a state of incoherence, where their conscious desires are broadcasting one frequency, while their unconscious beliefs and identity are broadcasting a completely different frequency. The universe receives these mixed signals and delivers mixed results. But when you release the small identity, something beautiful happens. Your entire system naturally comes into coherence because you're no longer fighting against your true nature. Your thoughts, emotions, and energy field all align with the frequency of your expanded self. The universe receives a clear, consistent signal and begins orchestrating reality to match that frequency. Have you ever noticed how some days everything just flows? Opportunities appear, people are helpful, resources show up exactly when you need them, and you feel like you're in perfect sync with life. Those are days when you've accidentally slipped out of the small identity and into coherence with your true nature. You weren't trying harder or doing anything special. You were simply being yourself without the overlay of limitation. The secret is learning to access this state intentionally, not through effort or technique, but through release. It's like learning to float in water. The more you struggle and try to stay up, the more you sink. But when you relax and trust the water to support you, floating happens naturally. Your expanded identity is like the water. It's already there, ready to support you, but you have to stop struggling against it. So where in your life are you still trying to float by struggling? Where are you attempting to become worthy instead of recognizing that worthiness is your natural state? And what would it feel like to just let go? If something in these words is resonating with you, if you're feeling a spark of recognition or a sense of coming home to something you've always known but forgotten, hit that subscribe button. This community is for people who are ready to remember who they really are beyond the stories of limitation. But let's go deeper into how this actually works in practical terms, because I know your mind might be asking, this sounds beautiful, but how do I actually release an identity that feels so real and solid? Here's the thing that most people don't understand about identity. What you think of as your identity is actually just a collection of repeated thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that have created neural pathways in your brain. Neuroscience shows us that every time you think the same thought or feel the same emotion, you strengthen those neural connections. Over time, these patterns become so automatic that they feel like who you are, but they're not who you are. They're just habits of consciousness that you've practiced so many times they've become unconscious. The small identity is like a well-worn path through a forest. You've walked this path so many times that it seems like the only way through, but the forest is vast and there are infinite other paths available. You've just been walking the same route for so long that you've forgotten the other possibilities exist. Quantum identity release is like stepping off that familiar path and remembering that you can walk anywhere in the forest. But here's what happens when you first step off the familiar path. Your nervous system panics. It starts sending alarm signals because it's designed to keep you safe, and safe to your nervous system means familiar. Even if familiar is limiting, painful, or exhausting, your nervous system prefers it because it's predictable. This is why most people unconsciously sabotage themselves when they start to expand. It's not because they don't want to grow. It's because their nervous system is trying to pull them back to the familiar identity for survival. Understanding this is crucial because it explains why willpower and positive thinking alone don't create lasting change. You're not just trying to change your thoughts. You're working with millions of years of evolutionary programming that's designed to keep you in known territory. Your nervous system doesn't care if you're happy or successful. It cares if you're alive, and alive means sticking with what's worked before. This is where quantum physics offers us a completely different approach. Instead of fighting against your nervous system or trying to override your programming through force, you learn to work with the quantum field in a way that feels safe to your system. You don't shock yourself into a new identity. You allow yourself to gradually tune into the frequency of your expanded self until it becomes more familiar than the old pattern. Think of it like learning a new language. At first, you have to consciously translate everything from your native language. It feels awkward and unnatural, but as you practice, there comes a moment when you start thinking directly in the new language. You don't have to translate anymore. The new language becomes as natural as your original one. Quantum identity release works the same way. At first, being your expanded self feels foreign and requires conscious choice. But with practice, it becomes your natural way of being. The key is understanding that you're not trying to become someone new. You're remembering someone you've always been underneath the learned limitations. Every child is born with this natural expansiveness. Watch a 3-year-old play, and you'll see someone who hasn't yet learned that they're supposed to be small. They create elaborate worlds from their imagination, they believe anything is possible, and they express themselves without self-consciousness. That expansiveness is still in you. It's just been covered over by years of conditioning. Here's a powerful realization that can shift everything. The small identity isn't actually protecting you from anything real. It's protecting you from imaginary dangers based on past experiences that are no longer relevant. Maybe you learned to be small because being big felt unsafe in your family system. Maybe you learned to struggle because ease was criticized as laziness. Maybe you learned to doubt yourself because confidence was seen as arrogance. These adaptations made sense at the time, but they're no longer serving you. Your nervous system is still running these old programs as if the original conditions still exist. It's like having a security system that's still protecting you from burglars who moved away 20 years ago. The system keeps sounding alarms and locking doors, but there's no actual threat. Quantum identity release is about updating your internal security system to match your current reality instead of your past experiences. But here's what's beautiful about working with quantum principles. You don't have to analyze or heal every past experience to update your identity. Quantum physics shows us that when you change your observation, you literally change your past. This sounds impossible from a linear perspective, but quantum mechanics proves that the act of observation affects not just the present moment, but the entire timeline of possibilities. When you begin observing yourself as naturally abundant instead of naturally lacking, you're not just changing your future. You're collapsing a different version of your past into reality, the version where you were always abundant, but just temporarily forgot. The version where every experience, even the challenging ones, were preparing you for expansion rather than proving your limitations. This isn't denial or spiritual bypassing. This is quantum mechanics applied to consciousness. Let me give you a practical example of how this works. Imagine you have a pattern of attracting relationships where you feel unappreciated. From the small identity perspective, you might think, I always choose people who don't value me because I don't value myself. This observation keeps you trapped in the pattern because you're using the past as evidence for future limitations. But from the quantum perspective, you recognize that you're currently observing yourself through the lens of someone who attracts unappreciative people. And this observation is collapsing your infinite relationship possibilities into that limited experience. Instead of trying to heal your lack of self-worth, you simply begin observing yourself as someone who naturally attracts appreciative, loving people. At first, this might feel like pretending or lying to yourself, but you're not pretending. You're choosing which version of yourself to collapse into reality. The version that attracts unappreciative people exists in the quantum field. The version that attracts loving people also exists in the quantum field. Both are equally real as possibilities. You get to choose which one you observe into existence. This is why affirmations and visualization often fail. People try to convince themselves they're abundant, while still identifying with the person who lacks abundance. They're trying to change the content of their experience while maintaining the same observer. But quantum identity release is about shifting the observer itself. You're not trying to convince the small self that it's abundant. You're releasing the need to be the small self at all. When you truly release into your expanded identity, you don't have to work to believe you're worthy of love, success, or abundance. Worthiness isn't something you have to achieve or maintain. It's simply the natural state of consciousness when it's not contracted into limitation. It's like asking water to work hard to be wet. Wetness is water's natural property, not something it has to earn or prove. Your natural properties are creativity, love, abundance, wisdom, and joy. These aren't things you have to develop or deserve. They're what you are when you're not busy being someone smaller. The small identity is like wearing a costume that's 3 sizes too small. It's not that the costume is bad or wrong, it's just not your actual size. When you take it off, you don't become someone new. You reveal who you've always been. But here's where most people get stuck. They're afraid that if they release the small identity, they'll lose their motivation, their humility, or their connection to others who are still struggling. They think the small identity is what makes them human, relatable, or driven. This is like thinking that a bird needs to remember how to crawl in order to stay humble. The bird doesn't lose anything essential by flying. It expresses its true nature. When you embody your expanded identity, you don't become arrogant or disconnected. You become more genuinely yourself, which makes you more authentic and relatable, not less. People are drawn to authenticity because it gives them permission to be authentic too. When you stop pretending to be smaller than you are, you create space for others to stop pretending too. Think about the people who have had the most positive impact on your life. Were they the ones who commiserated with your limitations and stayed small to make you feel comfortable? Or were they the ones who embodied their fullness and showed you what was possible? The people who inspire us aren't the ones who have perfected the art of limitation. They're the ones who have remembered how to be naturally themselves. This brings us to one of the most profound aspects of quantum identity release. When you stop collapsing into the small self, you don't just change your own experience. You change the quantum field around you in a way that affects everyone you encounter. Quantum entanglement shows us that particles that have interacted remain connected regardless of distance. When one particle changes its state, the other instantly changes too. Your consciousness works the same way. Everyone you interact with becomes quantum entangled with your energy field. When you're embodying the small identity, you're unconsciously inviting others to join you in that limited state. When you embody your expanded self, you're creating a field that supports others in remembering their own expansiveness. You become a tuning fork for possibility instead of limitation. This is why some people seem to bring out the best in everyone around them, while others seem to amplify drama and struggle. It's not about their personality or their techniques. It's about the identity they're embodying and the quantum field they're generating. When you release into your true nature, you become a catalyst for others to do the same, often without saying a word. But let's address the elephant in the room. Your mind is probably generating objections right now. This sounds too good to be true. If it's so simple, why isn't everyone doing it? What about real problems and limitations? What about systemic issues and genuine obstacles? These are important questions, and they deserve honest answers. First, it's not that everyone isn't doing it because it doesn't work. Most people aren't doing it because they don't know it's possible, and those who do know often get trapped in trying to use their small identity to achieve expansion. It's like trying to use a flip phone to access the internet. The phone isn't broken, but it doesn't have the capacity for what you're trying to do. You need to upgrade to a device that can handle the task. Second, quantum identity release doesn't mean pretending that challenges don't exist or that systemic issues aren't real. It means approaching those challenges from your expanded capacity instead of your contracted limitations. When you embody your full potential, you have access to creativity, resources, and solutions that simply aren't available from the small identity. You become part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Think about the people throughout history who have created positive change in the world. They didn't do it by accepting the limitations that everyone else believed were fixed. They did it by embodying a larger possibility and allowing that possibility to reshape reality. They weren't in denial about problems. They were accessing a level of consciousness that could see solutions others couldn't see. This is what becomes available when you release the need to be small. You don't lose your compassion for suffering. You gain access to the wisdom and power needed to actually address suffering effectively. You don't become disconnected from reality. You become connected to a larger reality that includes more possibilities than the limited version you've been accepting as true. Here's something that might surprise you. The small identity isn't just limiting for you. It's actually a disservice to everyone in your life. When you stay small to make others comfortable, you're robbing them of the inspiration and possibility that your fullness could provide. When you struggle to prove you're humble, you're modeling that struggle is necessary instead of showing that ease is possible. Every time you choose the small identity, you're casting a vote for limitation in the collective consciousness. Every time you embody your expanded self, you're casting a vote for possibility. The world doesn't need more people who have perfected the art of being small. The world needs people who remember how to be naturally magnificent and who can show others that magnificence is their birthright too. But here's the beautiful paradox. The more you embody your true nature, the more humble you become, because you realize that this magnificence isn't personal. It's not something you achieved or earned. It's simply what consciousness is when it's not pretending to be limited. It's like a wave realizing it's part of the ocean. The wave doesn't become arrogant about being wet. It recognizes that wetness is the nature of water itself. This recognition brings us to perhaps the most important aspect of quantum identity release. You're not trying to become special or different from others. You're recognizing that the magnificence you're accessing is the same magnificence that exists in everyone. By embodying it yourself, you're not separating yourself from others. You're demonstrating what's possible for all of us. So let me ask you this. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to improve the small version of yourself and simply released into who you naturally are? What would become possible if you stopped broadcasting lack and limitation and started broadcasting from wholeness and abundance? And what is it costing you and everyone around you to keep choosing the identity that's too small? Drop one word in the comments that captures what you're feeling right now as you consider these possibilities. I read every comment, and I love seeing this community support each other in remembering who we really are. Now, let's explore what actually happens in your nervous system and energy field when you begin this release process, because understanding the mechanics can help you navigate the transition with more ease and confidence. When you first begin to release the small identity, your body goes through what I call quantum recalibration. Your nervous system has been wired to maintain a specific energetic frequency that matches the limited version of yourself. Every cell in your body has been broadcasting and receiving signals that confirm this smaller identity. When you begin to shift into your expanded self, your entire biological system has to adjust to a completely different frequency. This is why expansion can sometimes feel uncomfortable at first. It's not because you're doing something wrong or because the process doesn't work. It's because your body is literally rewiring itself to hold a higher frequency. Think of it like upgrading your home's electrical system. When you install wiring that can handle more power, there might be some temporary disruptions while the new system comes online, but once it's integrated, you have access to capabilities that weren't possible with the old wiring. Your heart plays a crucial role in this recalibration process. The HeartMath Institute has discovered that your heart generates an electromagnetic field that's 60 times stronger than your brain's field. This heart field extends several feet beyond your body and is constantly communicating with the quantum field around you. When you embody the small identity, your heart generates a field of contraction, need, and limitation. When you release into your expanded self, your heart begins generating a field of coherence, wholeness, and abundance. This shift in your heart's electromagnetic signature literally changes how the quantum field responds to you. The field doesn't distinguish between what you want and what you are. It simply mirrors back the frequency you're broadcasting. When your heart is broadcasting from the small identity, the field reflects back experiences that confirm limitation. When your heart broadcasts from your expanded nature, the field begins orchestrating synchronicities, opportunities, and resources that match that elevated frequency. But here's what's fascinating about this process. The quantum field responds faster than your mind can track. Changes begin happening immediately, but they often show up in ways that your logical mind doesn't initially recognize as connected to your internal shift. You might release into your expanded identity, and then seemingly randomly encounter exactly the right person, find the perfect opportunity, or receive unexpected resources. Your mind might dismiss these as coincidences, but they're actually the field responding to your new frequency. This is why it's crucial to develop what I call quantum awareness. Instead of looking for changes to happen in the ways your mind expects, you begin noticing the subtle shifts in how life flows around you. You start paying attention to the quality of your interactions, the ease with which solutions appear, and the way opportunities seem to find you, rather than you having to chase them. Most people miss these early signs because they're looking for dramatic external changes while the real transformation is happening in the invisible realm of frequency and field dynamics. It's like planting a seed and then digging it up every day to see if it's growing. The growth is happening, but it's happening underground, in the realm of roots and foundation, before it becomes visible above the surface. Your expanded identity operates from a completely different relationship with time and causality than your small identity. The small self lives in linear time, where effort precedes results and you have to work hard now to get what you want later. But your expanded self operates in what quantum physicists call non-linear time, where your future desired state can actually influence your present moment experience. When you truly embody your expanded identity, you begin living from the end result rather than trying to create the end result. You're not someone who wants to be abundant. You're someone who is abundant and is allowing that abundance to express itself in physical form. You're not someone who hopes to find love. You're someone who is love and is attracting experiences that reflect that truth. This shift from wanting to being changes everything about how you move through the world. When you want something, you're broadcasting the frequency of not having it. The quantum field receives this signal of lack and continues to provide experiences of wanting rather than having. But when you are something, you're broadcasting the frequency of already possessing it. The field responds by delivering experiences that confirm this reality. Let me give you a concrete example of how this plays out. Imagine you've always struggled financially, and you want to experience abundance. From the small identity, you might think, I need to work harder, save more, and figure out how to make more money. This approach keeps you trapped in the frequency of lack because you're operating from the assumption that you don't currently have enough. But from your expanded identity, you recognize that abundance is your natural state, and scarcity is just a temporary experience of forgetting who you are. Instead of trying to create abundance, you begin embodying the version of yourself that has always been abundant but temporarily lost access to that experience. You start making decisions, thinking thoughts, and taking actions from this abundant identity, rather than from the scarce identity trying to become abundant. The difference is subtle but profound. The scarce identity trying to become abundant will work harder, stress more, and constantly monitor whether it's making progress. The abundant identity will make choices from overflow, trust in perfect timing, and take inspired action rather than forced action. The quantum field responds completely differently to these two frequencies, delivering experiences that match the identity being embodied. This brings us to one of the most important distinctions in quantum identity release. There's a difference between trying to feel abundant and actually being abundant. Trying to feel abundant is still the small identity attempting to manipulate its way into a better experience. Being abundant is recognizing that abundance is your essential nature, regardless of current circumstances. When you truly understand this distinction, you stop trying to change how you feel and start recognizing what you already are. You don't have to convince yourself you're worthy of love. You simply notice that love is what you are when you're not busy being someone who needs love. You don't have to work to feel confident. You recognize that confidence is your natural state when you're not identifying with the part of you that learned to doubt itself. This recognition creates what I call effortless embodiment. Instead of working to maintain a positive state or struggling to stay in your expanded identity, you simply release whatever is preventing you from being natural. It's like taking off shoes that are too tight. You don't have to work to feel relief. Relief is what naturally happens when you stop creating discomfort. Your expanded identity doesn't require maintenance or effort because it's not something you're creating. It's something you're revealing. The small identity requires constant maintenance because it's not natural to who you are. You have to keep reinforcing the limitations, reminding yourself of past failures, and working to stay within the boundaries of what you think is possible. But your true nature maintains itself because it's authentic to your essential being. This is why people who have truly embodied their expanded identity seem so effortless. They're not working harder than everyone else or using special techniques to stay positive. They've simply stopped working so hard to be smaller than they are. They've released the effort of limitation and allowed their natural magnificence to express itself. But here's something crucial to understand. This process isn't about perfection or never having challenging moments. Your expanded identity doesn't mean you never feel sad, angry, or uncertain. It means you experience these emotions from a place of wholeness rather than brokenness. You feel them fully without identifying with them as who you are. Think of emotions like weather patterns moving through the vast sky of your consciousness. The small identity gets caught in every storm and thinks it is the weather. Your expanded identity remains as the sky itself, allowing all weather patterns to move through while maintaining its essential spaciousness and clarity. The storms don't damage the sky. They're simply temporary expressions within the infinite space of what you are. This perspective transforms how you relate to challenges and difficulties. Instead of seeing them as evidence that you're not expanded enough or that the process isn't working, you recognize them as opportunities to practice being your true self under all conditions. Every challenge becomes a chance to discover that your essential nature remains unchanged regardless of circumstances. When you operate from this understanding, you stop trying to control your experience and start trusting your capacity to remain whole within any experience. This trust creates a profound relaxation in your nervous system because you're no longer trying to manage reality to protect a fragile identity. You know that who you really are cannot be threatened by temporary circumstances. This relaxation is actually what allows the quantum field to support you more effectively. When you're contracted in fear or effort, you create resistance that blocks the natural flow of resources and opportunities. When you're relaxed in the knowing of who you are, You become an open channel for the field to express its infinite creativity through your life. People often ask me, how do I know if I'm really embodying my expanded identity or just pretending? The answer is surprisingly simple. When you're pretending, it feels like work. You have to maintain it, remember to do it, and constantly check whether you're doing it right. When you're authentically embodying your true nature, it feels like coming home. There's a sense of relief, naturalness, and ease that comes with finally being yourself. Your body knows the difference too. Pretending creates tension, even if it's subtle. Authentic embodiment creates relaxation and flow. Your breathing deepens, your shoulders drop, and there's a quality of presence that wasn't there before. Other people notice this shift too, even if they can't articulate what's different. You become more magnetic and attractive, not because you're trying to be, but because authenticity is inherently attractive. So as we near the end of our exploration together, I want to leave you with the most important question of all. Not, how can I become my expanded self? But what am I doing that prevents me from being who I naturally am? The answer to this question is your doorway to quantum identity release. What stories are you telling yourself about why you have to stay small? What beliefs are you maintaining about what's possible for someone like you? What version of yourself are you afraid to release because it feels so familiar, even if it's limiting? And here's the invitation that could change everything. What if, just for the next 24 hours, you experimented with being the version of yourself that you would be if you knew, without a doubt, that you are already everything you've been seeking to become? The quantum field is waiting to support this version of you. The universe is designed to serve your highest expression. The only question is, are you ready to stop being smaller than you are? The most radical thing you can do in a world that profits from your limitations is to simply be who you actually are. Every industry, every system, every structure that depends on your sense of lack and inadequacy loses its power the moment you remember your true nature. This isn't about rebellion or resistance. It's about recognition. When you embody your expanded identity, you don't fight the systems of limitation. You transcend them by operating from a frequency they cannot touch. Here's what I know to be true after years of studying quantum mechanics and consciousness. You are not a human being having a spiritual experience. You are infinite consciousness having a temporary human experience, and you get to choose which aspect of that consciousness you embody moment by moment. The small identity is just one possible character you could play. Your expanded self is who you are when you're not playing any character at all. Every single day, you wake up with the opportunity to collapse your wave function of infinite possibility into any reality you choose. Most people unconsciously choose the same limited reality over and over again because it's familiar. But now you know you have a choice. Now you understand that your identity is not fixed, your limitations are not permanent, and your current circumstances are not the truth of who you are. The quantum field doesn't care about your history, your mistakes, or your current situation. It only responds to the frequency you're broadcasting right now, in this moment. Which means that right now, as you're listening to these words, you have the power to tune into your expanded identity and begin broadcasting a completely different signal to the universe. Your small identity will tell you that you need more time, more healing, more preparation, more proof that this is possible. But your expanded self knows that transformation happens in an instant. The moment you stop identifying with limitation and remember your true nature, everything changes. Not because you've worked hard to deserve it, but because you've stopped working hard to prevent it. I want you to feel into this possibility right now. What if the version of yourself that you've been dreaming of becoming is not a future possibility, but a present reality that you've been trained to look past? What if everything you've been seeking is already here, waiting for you to tune into the frequency where it exists? The people in this community understand something that most of the world has forgotten. We remember that we are not victims of circumstance, but creators of reality. We know that our identity is not determined by our past, but by our present moment choice of who to be. We recognize that abundance, love, success, and joy are not things we have to earn, but frequencies we can embody right now. If you're ready to join a community of people who are committed to embodying their highest potential and supporting others in doing the same, subscribe to this channel. But more importantly, subscribe to the version of yourself that you know is your truth. Make a commitment to yourself that you will no longer settle for being smaller than you are. Every time you choose your expanded identity over your small identity, you're not just changing your own life, You're contributing to a shift in human consciousness that allows everyone to remember their true nature. You're becoming part of the solution to the epidemic of limitation that has convinced billions of people that they are less than magnificent. The universe is not neutral. It is biased toward expansion, growth, and the full expression of consciousness in all its forms. When you align with this bias by embodying your true nature, you become a co-creator with the fundamental force that creates galaxies, orchestrates ecosystems, and maintains the perfect balance that allows life to flourish. This is not just personal development. This is cosmic evolution expressing itself through your willingness to be who you really are. This is the universe awakening to itself through your consciousness. This is love remembering its own infinite nature through your human experience. So here's my final invitation to you. Stop trying to become who you think you should be and start being who you actually are. Release the exhausting effort of maintaining an identity that was never true. Trust the quantum field to support the authentic expression of your consciousness. And remember that every moment offers you a fresh opportunity to choose expansion over contraction, truth over limitation, and love over fear. Your expanded identity is not waiting for you in some future moment when you've finally done enough work or healed enough wounds. It's here now, in this moment, available to you the instant you stop choosing to be someone smaller. The quantum field is responding to your frequency right now. The universe is listening to the signal you're broadcasting, and your life is reflecting back to you exactly who you believe yourself to be. The question is not whether you're capable of living from your expanded identity. The question is whether you're willing to stop living from anything less. Your magnificence is not optional. Your greatness is not negotiable. Your true nature is not something you have to earn or prove or work toward. It simply is, and it's waiting for you to remember that you are it, you have always been it, and you will always be it. No matter how convincingly you may temporarily forget, the time for playing small is over. The world needs you to be who you came here to be, and who you came here to be is nothing less than the full, unlimited, magnificent expression of infinite consciousness, having the most extraordinary human experience imaginable. Welcome home to who you really are.